before I introduce our guest, we're going to show you a very quick couple of minutes film or video about LAX. A lot of what we're going to be talking about. So let's show you that, and then I'll introduce our guest.
From its early days, when the fields of barley, lima beans, and wheat were converted into dirt landing strips, the city of Los Angeles' airport has transformed with the times. In 1949, it became Los Angeles International Airport. By the 1960s, some of LAX's most iconic structures were symbols that LAX was at the forefront of jet travel. In 1981, LAX began a $700 million expansion in preparation for the 1984 Summer Olympic Games. Even then, passengers, cars, and buses competed for space as LAX was feeling the pressure of the growing demands for air travel. Now, nearly 30 years later, congestion, delays, and its surrounding impacts call for more than $8 billion to be invested to bring LAX into the modern era for the modern traveler by providing world-class facilities. 74.9 million passengers traveled through LAX in 2015, more than ever before. But the key to making LAX the airport that others around the world measure themselves by has been missing. Now is the time. Imagine a future where our travelers are connected through the entire airport experience using a state-of-the-art transportation system that is swift, reliable, and sustainable. Every airport guest will be a VIP, soaring above roadways and curbs on a 2-mile-long aerial automated people mover that makes airport traffic a worry of the past. Renting a car will be hassle-free in the new consolidated rental car facility, designed to maximize consumer choices while providing efficient car checkout and return. The promise of a true connection to public transit will become a reality. The Airport People Mover will make connecting to Los Angeles Metro's rail and bus systems seamless. 2 intermodal transportation centers will provide a new experience to meet and greet with ample parking and quick connections to hotel and other airport shuttle services. As guests approach the central terminal area, they will experience the airport in an entirely new and exciting way. Automated people mover stations will be open, easy to navigate, and welcoming whether you are local or have traveled from across the globe. Sky bridges with moving walkways provide unobstructed and new access points to the terminals. With trains arriving every 2 minutes, today's connected and technology-savvy travelers will have the predictability and reliability they need when catching a flight. Our final destination is an airport that will be the envy of cities around the world. Join us for the journey as we complete the transformation of LAX. This is the great city of Los Angeles, and this is the future of LAX.
Makes you want to buy an airline ticket. So I don't know if you, well, let's come on up here, Deborah, and I'll introduce you. And we'll move this screen up here. That's your one, right?
Got it right. Very hydrated. This is a tough crowd. Low. This is where you want to be tonight.
Yes, they do. Okay. Well, welcome to Loyola Marymount University. As you'll soon recognize, that was her voice also moderating that. And actually, that's how she got the job. She was doing that voiceover, and they said, you should be the head of the airport.
That's right.
So Deborah Flint was appointed CEO of LAWA, the Los Angeles World Airports, which includes not only LAX, but Van Nuys as well. And at the time you were appointed, also included Ontario, and we'll talk about why it doesn't now. Before she was moved to Los Angeles, she was also responsible for Oakland International Airport. And while at Oakland, had a very important role in the BART connection, and we'll be talking about another mass transit connection to an airport. She was also appointed to President Obama's Advisory Committee on Aviation Consumer Protection, and she also serves on the Oversight Committee of the Transportation Research Board's Airport Cooperative Research Program, and is Vice President of the California Airports Council and serves on the Airport Council International World Board. She's all about aviation. Okay, so really my first question, besides welcoming you to Loyola Marymount University, is what's a nice girl like you doing in the aviation space? How did that start?
Great question. First, let me just say hello. How fun it is for me to be in a room with all of you exciting young minds, people early in their careers. Most people, I see you over there, Tom, early in their careers. And learning and figuring out your path and how you can contribute to society in the long term. Having forums like this, for me, is as much about receiving as it is about hopefully giving, and imparting and sharing some of my perspective and experiences along the way. Do you mind if I first get a sense of some of the majors that are in this room? I know this is a Los Angeles politics class.
Yeah,
Can you shout out like
your hand
who's a political science major?
Raise your hand if you're in the LA politics class and your favorite professor is Fernando Guerra.
Yeah.
Oh, wait a minute, more hands need to go up.
What other majors are out there? Shout it out.
Come on, I see economics.
Business. Business.
International relations.
What was that?
African American studies.
Great.
Psychology.
Cool. Any other majors?
I see some urban studies majors.
Great. Chicana studies. Ooh, fantastic.
Who's that? Who let her in? No.
We need you. Trust and believe. No, that's great, because every single major that you all shouted out are majors that airport leaders like myself are looking for in the airport environment. And that might be surprising to you, as it was to me, frankly. When I graduated from college, I did not have in mind that I wanted to be the CEO of an airport. And so I was very fortunate in terms of finding my pathway here through chance. I did have the opportunity as a young woman growing up with my parents to travel to many parts of the world, some great environments, some very poverty-stricken environments in different countries around the globe. And my experiences going into different airports probably changed me. I say it's a Freudian in a certain theme, that seeing some of the best airports in the world, the biggest, these grand pieces of infrastructure and people from all over the place traveling and moving through, and then going to some airports in rural parts of countries that were no more than a landing strip, and people showing up in very rural conditions to try to help you find your way into a country. As I look back, I said that probably had a profound influence on me and my fascination with airports. But during all those times, I didn't realize that there was this huge machine, a huge business behind the leadership of airports. And so I found myself quite lucky that in using my business degree, I found an opportunity at the Port of Oakland, which is a multimodal port, very different and unique actually across the country. There are really about a handful of port authorities that will operate both seaports, airports, and typically some significant commercial real estate development as well. And so I was able to begin my career out of college at the Port of Oakland. And I began in finance, and I was fascinated about joining that organization because of its multimodalism, and was considering a master's in transportation. As I about a year into working there, was presented the opportunity to work in the aviation division in the bond financing program and capital program. Got my hands on my first big project, which was a reconstruction of a main runway. And when I assembled the room with a team of engineers and scientists and a communications team to work with the community that was going to be impacted by this runway reconstruction, I knew that that was it. That this was exactly where I wanted to be, exactly what I wanted to do. And the airport industry had, truly put jet fuel in my blood at that point. It reflected to me just how significant the business of airports are, from investing billions of dollars in infrastructure to ensuring the safety and security of millions, tens of millions of passengers, to the social benefits that come when you work at an airport. At Los Angeles World Airports, our values are about creating a great impact on the communities and the regions that we serve. So ensuring that the 50,000 people that show up to work at LAX have great jobs, that those jobs are sustainable, that they work in good environments, that they have careers, that they can support their families and be in a workplace where they thrive. Those are all just a small portion of the elements of what I get to show up and do every day when I come to work at Los Angeles World Airports.
So, what was the point in time when you became the head of aviation at Oakland? How did that happen?
So, like all opportunities that in your career, I think you'll all look back and you'll find yourself in this place where you're like, there's no way I'm ready for this. I was afforded the opportunity to be the director when we hit the lowest drop in passenger traffic that the airport had experienced in 10 years.
Oh, so typical. The things are going down. Let's have a woman be in charge now.
The director at the time left the organization, and the board looked to me to lead the airport at that time. And I worried. This was an unprecedented time. This was the economic recession. I know there is an econ major here of 2008. That we started seeing the signs of what would be an incredible downturn at the beginning of 2007 with a couple airline bankruptcies. I remember this one week in April. There were like 3 carriers, 2 foreign, that filed bankruptcy and left passengers stranded. And it was just so incredible. And from that moment on, if you watch the airline trends, that recession was showing its signs, the lack of liquidity in the market, overcapacity. If you remember, you all might be too young, but your friends and your families were flying back in that era when every time you bought a ticket, you were guaranteed you were going to have a seat empty next to you. Never did you have really a full row. Very rarely on your flights were you not able to book at the last minute, because the business at the time had a lot of capacity. And carriers were losing money hand over fist, but they were able to continue going, continue borrowing. And so very similar to the trends we saw in the housing market, the airline market suffered devastating losses, a lot of consolidation, air carrier bankruptcies, and essentially a resetting of the industry. And so in leading Oakland at that time, which is a medium hub airport, this was not just a story that was playing out in the Wall Street Journal and was very far removed. This came home to airports like Oakland's and even Los Angeles across the country. And what did that mean? It meant that we had to retool our financial approach. It meant that less carriers, less people buying goods and merchandise at the airport was going to have a pretty stark impact on our operating budget. For many airports, half the business was just gone one day. Some airports had to close down terminals, mothball them. Many airports, and like myself, had to do what is one of the most difficult things to do, but which is to go through layoff procedures of staff. Staff who had been there for a very long time, who were supporting their family. Seeing airlines close, those people, those staffers are left without jobs with sudden notice. It was a very difficult time. So coming in at that time also afforded me an opportunity. Now at that time, I didn't know if the drop was going to continue, but I knew we had to change our approach. That what worked before during the glory years of the market was not going to work in a downturn. And for anyone that comes into an organization or a situation when you're facing that type of a market shift, it truly is and can be a godsend. It truly is the lemonade, which is for an organization that might have had some level of complacency, you can now look to that organization and say, look, we all need to come up with a new game plan. We need to have a new strategy, a new approach. For Oakland, the key that I saw was having a significant, bold improvement. And it essentially landed on my lap. And that was the opportunity because of President Obama's ARA, which was the American Reinvestment Act. It was 2 R's though. Anyway, yeah. So there was new investment of federal funds available for eligible projects around the country. And recovery, thank you, Ross.
We don't really know if it's recovery, but we'll go with that.
No, it was American Reinvestment Recovery Act. And so to me, the opportunity for us to deliver the BART Airport Rail Connection project was right there. It was a project that fit the bill of what ARA was looking to do. It was a project that would level the playing field for the airport being able to compete with San Francisco Airport, which had a rail connection, and we saw that after that rail connection was implemented, traffic boomed at San Francisco. It wasn't the only reason, but it certainly had an effect that when people are able to take public transit, access the airport easily, more simply, that traffic was stimulated because of that. And so I stood behind that project. It was very controversial for you political science folks. The issue was you have this funding, and it was available not just for infrastructure investment, but also to relieve some of the operational challenges that many transit agencies were facing. So we found infrastructure pitted against some operational needs of various transit organizations. And those that didn't believe in the big vision of investing in a project of that magnitude on the East Bay. So there were a lot of social issues that played out in the discourse. One thing that I say is that the discourse in the public was great. It was heavily debated, heavily contested, but at the end of the day, we were able to create finally an overdue transit link for Oakland Airport and to serve the rest of the East Bay. And it's been a great success. It put thousands of people back to work in a community that needed new jobs right there in the local community, and stimulated the airport's growth as well.
So you're hanging out in Oakland, doing a good job. That the BART link that you talked about, but also new terminals, and the downturn and recession has kind of stabilized and it kind of ended. Things are starting to move up again. Then you get a call about Los Angeles.
That's right, and I do believe
Who
as
called
I've
you?
shared, a recruiter. Yeah, I won't say his name, but I did get a call. I got a few calls, but usually these recruitments, I would recommend to you all as well is make friends with recruiters. Sometimes you might find yourself in a situation where you don't necessarily want to pick up the phone. You're not looking. You're not interested, but you never know when you're going to need a good recruiter, and it's their business to know the who's who in a number of fields. And I recommend strongly that you search for those recruiters that are in your industry and establish and keep those relationships. They can be very, very valuable. So when I got the call and thought about the opportunity at LA, it was interesting to me because I realized that there had been a couple airports, number one, that I had been called about, some in very cold climates. And so I would also say to folks out there, don't try to recruit someone from California to come out to the Midwest, even if your airport has a big capital program. Don't call them out there in December. That's not good. It's kind of challenging. But with LA, I realized that of all the airports that I followed in my career and had a keen interest on and knew what was happening, it was LAX. Like LAX was this airport to me that epitomized what aviation should be. The jet era, when you look at the theme building at LAX, do you all know what building that is?
It was in the video, and we drive by it all the time. So.
It is one of the most visited places in LA still, and our building isn't open. We're going to do something about that. I have a plan to reinvigorate that building and make it publicly accessible again, because it's a beautiful building. It was designed by Paul Williams. It's just becoming more widely known that this was one of our premier African-American architects in the city of Los Angeles, and he was just honored by the American Architects Institute for all of his work, a legendary architect. And that building is itself, it's beautiful, it's iconic. It symbolized modern aviation back in the 60s. And that was the vision of LAX that I saw and I recalled and had always been fascinated with. LAX is also just this booming city in and of itself, even though it's only on 3,200 acres, which is far, far, far too small for the magnitude of the traffic and operations that we have there. But in LAX, to me, also represented this incredible opportunity, because for those of us in the industry and those who fly, you go through LAX today, and while in the last several years we've made enormous strides, the majority of LAX, the roadway infrastructure, many of the terminals, the facilities are lackluster. Low ceilings, dark, not evocative of what you would think of this amazing entertainment industry. This place that now has Silicon Beach and has the third highest venture capital investment of any city in the US. I mean, LA is just an incredible global brand. And LAX had so much and has so much opportunity to reflect that. So that's something
So
that
they
pulls
didn't
me
really,
right away.
They didn't really have to sell you, right? They just meant
There's
you
a
were
little, you know, we all have our choices to make. It has to be the right one. But there's certainly a huge natural draw and appeal to LA being the type of city that I would love, to LAX having the type of opportunities to actually make a transformation and to make a difference. And one of the things as I reflect on my career, I feel very happy and blessed that I was able to do something significant in Oakland, and certainly see the opportunity to do that here in LA.
So you mentioned, and many of us know, how lackluster LAX was. Some of those terminals, just remember Terminal 2, it still has that same tunnel from 50 years ago. How did that happen? Why did that happen? Why was there a lack of investment or upkeep for LAX?
Part of it is about relationships. So like many airports around the country, we find ourselves challenged by the communities that live in and around the airport. When communities don't understand the benefit of having a big airport in the background, that often results in litigation. And airports and communities that surround them have had, not just in LA, but again across the country, have had
Santa
very
Monica has been in the
challenged.
news lately.
Santa Monica is a good example of that. Oakland, San Francisco. I mean, pretty much every large airport has dealt with anti-growth, anti-expansion litigation. And the ideal scenario is that the airports and its leadership is really sensitive to the communities that live around the airport and recognize that those communities should see and feel the value of having one of the top airports in their backyard. There are cities across the country that would be desperate to have the type of economic development that comes from an airport even half the size of LAX. The 50,000 jobs, the billions of dollars of economic output when you look down the entire supply chain. So it's a great economic generator, but yes, you know, airports can be noisy. If the infrastructure isn't appropriate, then airports can cause havoc and congestion in surrounding neighborhoods. So our focus today at Los Angeles World Airports is building that infrastructure, building our projects the right way, looking to not just what we build, those are going to be fantastic architectural structures, but how we build it. We have new commitments to include local workforce in ways that we never have before. Local and small business inclusion. Those aren't just the typical, okay, you know, that's what the city requirements are, so we're going to check that box. But this is a value that runs very deep. We have a very strong personal belief that the airport has to benefit the people around it. And if it does, then the airport will be something that the city can be truly proud of.
So typically we don't think of women being in these type of roles, but in Los Angeles, not only you at LAWA, but we have Marcy Edwards at the DWP, and then also you replaced a woman. And I was trying to look at all the different departments in the city of Los Angeles, there are very few where we've had two women in a row. The only one I can think of really is actually a small department, the city clerk's office. Currently have a woman there, and she replaced another woman, but I can't even think of another one. So given this pretty male-dominated industry in general, you know, and then we have two women in a row, what's your leadership style, and how is it different from your predecessor and from people that you learned, or how do you try to manifest that style?
Well, I'm going to share something even more about Los Angeles, and it truly is an anomaly, the entire industry. Not only was my predecessor a woman, but the two predecessors before her were also women. And this is unheard of. I'm so proud to follow Lydia Kennard, and so you know Lydia, and Kim Day, who is now the CEO of Denver. And there are more women now at the head of airports across the country than there ever have been. But the diversity of the leaders is still really lacking. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, it's time to get a man in there now.
Well, yes, I mean, that might indeed happen, but we're on a good roll and we have a lot to show for it. And so, you know, leadership of an airport is about being multifaceted. I believe you have to love what you do and love the people that show up and work and give in ways that is more than just watching the bottom line and watching the rules and the regs, but truly being about the vision and the values. And when I come to work, leave work, it stays with me that at the airport I'm looking to make a difference in the world. I shared with you earlier in the conversation how my background, with my parents, we traveled to so many different airports, but that was my parents in search of opportunity, in search of my dad becoming a physician and my mom ultimately a nurse, and coming from backgrounds that people wouldn't believe. They were so rudimentary and so rural. And aviation changed everything for them. It changed the whole pathway for myself and my brother and my sisters. And they are very accomplished, and my parents are very proud. So when we look today at what airports mean, I think back to just a month ago when I wasn't pleased about it, but I understood it when LAX had 7,000 protesters that came to the airport because of the executive order on immigration. And you realize how profound that is. And this isn't just a transportation facility that I'm looking to keep secure and to keep X number of passengers moving an hour. This is about the global connectivity of aviation and what it means to connect the world and how powerful and how important that truly is.
So you have a lot of challenges at LAX. You talked about the neighbors, but you also have this massive development. You have traffic. Then you have that you're going to be. It's really a very small footprint, LAX. And you talked about 3,200 acres, which sounds like a lot, but it's really tiny for an airport. How are you going to do all this massive development that we just saw in the video and others and keep the airport running? How does that work?
I'm counting on a lot of innovation in science and technology. So right now we're, as Fernando says, we have several $1 billion in different programs that are going to renovate our terminals, renovate our airfields, as well as the entire roadway and build a train to come into the system. A project of this magnitude in terms of its scale and its depth is probably unheard of. LaGuardia might be the only other airport that has a project as expansive and significant as we have. And if you follow a little bit, you saw that about 5 months ago, people were abandoning cars on the parkway to get into LaGuardia because traffic was so bad due to construction. And so I'm determined to make sure that doesn't happen at LAX during our construction, which means we need great planning, logistics, and science teams to help plan that. We're undergoing a logistics and planning constructability study now to make sure that there's availability of the right type of workers for all of the projects. If I only have a limited pool of electricians or pavement layers and I need them to work on $5 billion worth of work, but we only have $2 billion worth of labor supply, that's an issue and that's a problem. We can't wait till we're in construction to figure that out. So we're involved in looking at the supply chain and creating avenues and pathways to make sure the resources are going to be there, and doing a lot of analysis to ensure that the projects are going to flow in a manner that ensures that they are indeed constructible.
So we hear the number 8.5 billion and then 5.5 billion. So is that 14 billion?
We are we are evaluating a number of projects now, which puts the number officially out in question. But our program is over $14 billion now.
Over how many
and the
years?
LAMP program between now and 2024.
That's crazy.
It's a huge amount of development. The APM program, again, this is the train that's going to connect to the metro system. We're going to build a consolidated rent-a-car facility, and that will come into the airport on what we call the land side. So you will get out at the garages, crossover, elevated pedestrian bridges into the terminal. So we'll keep people off that lower level roadway traffic. That's about a $5.5 billion project. Kind of also to respond to your question, we're taking new and innovative approaches in project delivery. So we've watched the public sector industry change how it delivers projects to more of a private sector model. Before, public sector would have to go and we would design the whole project, put it out to a bid, take whoever the lowest cost proposer is and let them build it. Inevitably, for public agencies, those contractors would put in an infeasible low bid that then they would chase to make up a profit by issuing change orders. So you all would read about projects like the Big Dig or other airport projects that went way over budget, and it might seem like those agencies are responsible when it was really the procurement method that led to that kind of a life cycle. What we're doing is actually a new approach for airports, but not new in other transit-oriented industries, and that is a P3. And this P3 takes the private sector, they form teams that not only finish designing the project, so they bring all their great ideas and innovation to the table. They build the project, they also operate and maintain it, so that we're evaluating not just getting the project in the ground, but the entire life cycle cost of the project.
3P stands for public-private partnership.
Right.
And so then the private sector is asked to build something on behalf of the public sector, and then they will maintain it. So I mean, we're talking about a lot of money and a lot of building. And so that in the video we saw that what you call the APM is the automated people mover. So
yes,
that's the people mover. That's
right.
one
That's
project,
the train. That's right.
Then we saw the rental car facility, which is always crazy to me that in Los Angeles, the one city, when you arrive, you have to rent a car, right? And they're all over the place. And I've lived in Westchester since 1985, and I've given at least over 1,000 tourist directions on a because they're always lost. They're all over the place, and that other cities have these rental, centralized rental facilities. It made sense. LA should be the first one to have that.
I agree with you.
Okay, how much
we're
is-
making
how
up
much
for
is
lost
that one?
time. We're making
How much
up
is
for
that gonna
lost time
cost?
now. That's good. That's $1 billion investment, and this will be the largest rental car facility in the country. So we are making up for the fact now that we have over 20 different rental car locations, and it wreaks havoc again on the neighborhoods. I know you all feel some of that here coming to school. It's just not how you would plan it, but that's the circumstance that exists today. Again, the good news is that by 2023, we will have that facility in place.
Does it worry you at all that we're going to spend $1 billion on this rental facility, and that by the time we finish it, that maybe autonomous vehicles will kill off rental?
It's totally keeping me up at night. Absolutely. It's a year ago, that was the thing I challenged my team is tell me why.
She's worried about it?
Yeah, I am, absolutely. I tell the
So
team all
autonomous
the
vehicles
time.
can possibly change LA.
I do believe so.
Okay.
I believe that the adoption of technology is happening faster than we ever would believe it would, and that includes both unmanned ground vehicle as well as unmanned aerial vehicles. I sit today on a national task force on unmanned aerial vehicles. And a week ago,
You mean autonomous airplanes, no pilots? I'm
No
I'm not ready for that.
get ready. They're almost that way now anyway.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Frankly, we still need pilots. Don't get the Pilots Association. Don't get mad at me. We still need pilots. But if you look at, Moore's law, right, which is computing power is doubling every 2 years, it's very, very true. It really struck and resonated with me the 10-year anniversary of the iPhone. Like 10 years, I know to you all seems like so long, but a decade or so from now for you, you'll realize it's not that long at all. And everything that has been transformed just by the iPhone, from apps to FaceTiming, everything has happened and changed so fast because of that. So I do believe that there is sizable disruption coming in transportation, and it will come from unmanned technology. So I've challenged my team to say, not only are we building this large consolidated rental-car facility, but we're also investing probably a total of another $1 billion in traditional parking garages, because we are so short of parking today. But how do we build those facilities in a way that they have the ability to be converted easily to other facilities? If there is a rapid adoption of unmanned, well, how does my rental car facility serve as a portal for unmanned vehicle distribution, so that we are early in the market? Google, maybe about 2 years ago, invested in San Jose Airport in their private operating facility. And when they did that, I guess I'm a paranoid type, but most CEOs, it pays off to be very paranoid about the business. I got very concerned when I saw that, because I said, this isn't Google trying to go in and just operate a private jet facility for San Jose or have a place where they can control keeping their planes. This is them trying to understand what the aviation business is and see how they can disrupt the market. And I'm still convinced that whether it's Elon Musk or it's Google, that disruption is right at our doorstep. And so whether it's parking, whether it's how people buy food at the airport, and we can talk about that too, because I have thoughts on that. All of the different touch points we have at the airport stand to be disruptive. And I'm sure that some of you in this room, as your careers take off and grow, you'll have some way of influencing and changing the things that we in the industry have taken for granted for many, many years.
So let me talk a little bit about a boring subject, which is really governance and budget. So LAX and LAWA, which also controls Van Nuys, which is a very large, one of the largest general aviation airports, and we can talk about that in a second. But LAWA, LAX, is owned by the city of LA. But yet in the city's budget, you're nowhere in there. You have your own independent budget. You raise your own revenue, and you pay for everything. You get nothing from the city, and you give nothing back to the city?
Well, we give a lot back to the city.
No, I'm talking about their in terms of money, in terms of their budget.
Everything we give back to the city is within the federal law.
Okay, you caught that, camera?
It's all legal. And I say that because as an airport, we have a lot of regulations. So I have local regulations, but I also have federal regulations. And airports are governed by the DOT and particularly through the Federal Aviation Administration. And they have imposed a series of regulatory requirements on airports that essentially ensure that airports sustain and thrive for the purpose of being airports. Bringing broader economic impact to their regions, but ensuring that city halls across the country don't go and take all the money that the airports generate and take it back for city hall
why
purposes.
not? I mean, theoretically, it's not. It's a golden goose that's laying a golden egg. It really does help with economics, but it's owned by the citizens of LA. Why can't we just charge $1 more per airplane and use that for homelessness? It's our asset. Why should the federal government tell us what we can do with that or not? Theoretically.
Theoretically. Well, we signed, it's not an indenture, but it's similar to an indenture agreement. They're called grant assurances. And so the year that we took the first $1 million from the FAA.
That was a mistake.
And we've probably taken $100 million in the years following total to support airport infrastructure. We essentially signed an agreement to the FAA that we were going to follow the federal rules. And those rules say that airports, all money generated, need to go back to the benefit purely of the airport and to sustain the airport. instead of looking at airports as a for-profit business, like some airports in different countries do, in America, airports are really looked at as a federally governed transportation agency whose sole purpose is just to promote the movement of passengers in the air region, and all monies generated are to go back to lowering the access to airports. So that means I should charge, if I generate a lot of money, then it should do a couple things. I should be reinvesting in the infrastructure it takes to operate the airport, and lowering the fees that those who participate in the airport's economy pay. And so then that would stimulate more economy.
But you see how that sounds very un-American, un-capitalist. I mean, if I got a great resource and I'm making money, I can't make money because then I have to give it back. And it's like, you know, how often do you hear people say, government ought to run like business? Well, here we are. We have a great business, and then we're not allowed to make a profit. That doesn't make sense to me.
You are in line with what we say as an industry, frankly. We do believe that the airport industry and the federal regulation should be reformed. And we know our current president is really interested in reducing regulatory burdens on different entities. And we have some ideas on ways that airports can act more like businesses. It's uncomfortable for our federal regulators. But as we look at, as you know, the $1 trillion needed in infrastructure around the country, airports are a solution to being able to
Let me throw
spur
a theory
investment.
out there. Is it really for the general good of Los Angeles or aviation, or is it that airlines and others in the industry have a very strong lobbyist who then pass certain laws that tie the hands of airports and prevent them from being more successful in terms of generating revenue? Just a theory.
It's a spot on. So the airline business
Which
is
part, about
a
the
cutthroat.
lobbyists or?
So both. So there's this old adage of how do you become a millionaire? Well, you're a billionaire and you decide to start an airline. Quickly again, you'll find yourself in millionaire status because it's a very difficult business to actually be profitable. They're doing great today, but it has definitely, as a business and an industry, shown challenges. So the competition is severe and significant. Airlines' preference is to get into an airport, a large hub, whether it's LA, Atlanta, San Francisco, and dominate the traffic of that airport in that region, and essentially hold that competition in abeyance. We are very, very fortunate at LAX. We have something that very few airports have, and this was also attractive to me, and that is we don't have any one carrier that has any more than a 25% market share. And that creates a wonderful, wonderful environment for this city and for this airport because the carriers are interested in working with the communities and being great community partners because they're all vying to have more operations and more business at LAX.
So you, in your previous answer, you mentioned our current president, and last time I heard him talk about LAX was during the presidential debates, and he mentioned LAX. Did you want to tell us what he said and then how you reacted to that?
So I was, actually Trevor and I, we were in Montreal at a global meeting of airports, and I was watching the debates, and do you all remember what he said? What? Said it was a third world airport. And so I won't repeat what I said privately about that.
We'll have to ask Trevor.
Yeah, you can ask Trevor. And so here's the thing that was interesting. So the reaction across the industry was, great, airports are being mentioned, right? Because sometimes, and airports have felt like we are the forgotten industry. People think about infrastructure in terms of roads and highways and rail, ports, but airports people may not really understand. And so there was some excitement that at least the topic of airports were there. I will say that then the president did follow up and invited the industry of aviation, both airports and airlines, to meet with him a few weeks ago. And that, from a public perception, was positive to be able to get together as an industry and talk about the infrastructure needs, because again, at airports they've been significant. And the regulatory scheme for airports certainly needs refreshing and updating.
So, high-speed rail, let me throw two things that are out there, high-speed rail and the Olympics. What is LAX's role in either one? Were you part of the bid, or have you been in contact with LA 2024? And even in the video, it showed that the last really major modernization was for the 1984 Olympics. And now a lot of the timelines that we see is to finish by 2024. So it almost seems that we have to have an Olympics here to modernize LAX.
The real ironic thing is that the 2024 deadline was actually established before the Olympic bid resurfaced itself for LAX.
Yes,
I
we'll
promise
say
you
that.
that. You can check the audits. So I'm excited about the Olympics. To me, it's a galvanizing opportunity. When you see what cities can do in order to ensure that they're prepared, frankly, that makes my job easier, because cities are challenged in awarding big projects and pushing big projects through a city governance infrastructure. Many cities have just seen projects delayed because of that process. And when you have a Olympic games kind of coming at you in a certain time frame, it helps to keep everyone moving and to get the right resources and the right level of cooperation. So I see it as nothing but positive, and would be really excited if in September we find out that we have had the successful bid and that the Olympics are coming back to Los Angeles. If it's not the case, then I still am very positive about the amount of political support we have for the program and the project to move forward. And I believe that we would be very strong contenders for 2028. So that momentum that's coming behind Los Angeles infrastructure, whether it's the metro project, the stadium project, or what we're doing at the airport, I believe will still remain strong.
So nothing then will change whether we get the Olympics or not. We find out in September, but the plans that you have for the airport stay the same irrespective of whether we are chosen as the Olympics.
They're not Olympic driven, and I believe that's why this city's bid is so strong, is that so much of the infrastructure that is being developed was underway, was planned, or is already in place. And so we know that minimizing financial risk to the city is a huge issue. And for the airport, all of the plans that we have and that we're pushing forward are going to happen irregardless.
Yeah, high-speed rail.
I wish high-speed rail really good luck. It is I feel for my friend Dan Richards there. They have had such trials and tribulations in getting that project, and as you know, it's when you have big, bold vision, you have to just keep at it. It's not going to be easy, and that's, I think, the situation that high-speed rail is in. For LAX, we have a sizable amount of the market that actually flies between the Bay Area and LAX. But as we forecast this investment, which goes out decades and decades into the future, that traffic will grow. And so finding alternative ways of relieving traffic is going to be important for the entire state and for the region, whether that's traffic at other airports in the region. I mean, we do have a bounty of other regional airports that can pick up more of that service, or if it's high-speed rail, having alternatives for the future growth of the state is important.
Yeah, and you talked about the bounty of other airports here in the region, Burbank, Ontario, Long Beach, John Wayne, which is in Orange County. And so talk about Ontario. When you became CEO, Ontario was part of LAWA. Now it's no longer part of LAWA. And let me take the perspective of the Ontario and San Bernardino people. They were like, LAWA, you're doing us no favors. You are not sending, we have this great airport out here. We're not getting the airlines. You're not marketing for us. You're trying to keep all the revenue for yourself. And so you're doing a terrible job running Ontario. Why don't you give it to us?
So you'll walk into some jobs and realize you just want to streamline the amount of work you have. And so sometimes you have 3 airports and you say, I need to streamline this to 2. That's not what happened. So when I began my leadership, we were in heavy litigation with the city of Ontario, the Ontario International Airport Authority. And that litigation was very draining for the entire organization. We spent a lot of money. There was a lot of money at risk in that litigation. And it goes back to remarks that I said earlier, which is how important it is to build relationships and to build partnerships and to build bridges. But frankly, those opportunities had long passed when I got there. And essentially, we were looking, both parties, from the City of Los Angeles as well as the Ontario International Authority, to find the right place where we could give them local control. And that was something that our mayor expressed as important. I took an assessment of it when I came in and realized that that was the right and appropriate thing to do as well. And so we struck a deal. We struck a deal that met the terms that the feds wanted. As I said, what they would not approve is a deal where LAWA would have invested money that it didn't see returned into a facility. We can't just give funds, even as to another airport. And so we were able to come to terms on a way that said, look, this region feels very strongly that they can do more with their airport than the joint venture agreement that we had many years ago, JPA rather, Joint Powers Agreement that we had in place many years ago. That agreement wasn't in perpetuity, and so sometimes in business you'll find that no deal is ever 100% done, and this was certainly that case. They have a new director on board. I can see that since we've executed that agreement and Ontario has local control, that community is really excited about their ability to control the destiny of that airport. When we concluded the agreement and did the handover, it was nothing but support. I said to my team that whatever the challenges and the angst and the battles of the past are, we're now going to set another airport in our country, in our national aviation system, up for success. We're going to support them, we're going to have a great transition, and they needed that. They needed our help to make that happen. And thanks to good work on my team, Trevor, he facilitated us being able to get federal legislation that actually helped them to be able to get the funding that they needed, and that put them in a much better place. And I'm excited for them. I think they have a big, challenging road ahead, having come from a market with a lot of competition where airports cannot compel carriers to do what we want. Carriers make market-based decisions. And so, they have a big challenge ahead of them, but they have the right spirit, and they have a great team working to make that happen.
So then, what formal relationship do we have with them? What budgetary relationship do we have with Ontario right now?
At this time, we have an employee sharing relationship. So one of the things that was important to the mayor and to my board was ensuring that all of the employees that we have out there have a job to come back to. Because Ontario, as a new airport authority, has its rights to set up a whole new employee regime, a whole new governance structure. They get to start from scratch, like a startup airport per se. But we wanted to make sure that in that startup, the employees that had been assigned to Ontario would be assured a job. And so we have an employee sharing arrangement that will continue for the next 12 months, I believe. And at that point, and through this process, those employees have the opportunity to either move over to the Ontario Airport Authority or come back to jobs that we've guaranteed at LAWA.
And so, like, you talked about bonds and stuff like that, all those liabilities were transferred over to them, all the revenue they're getting. So once this 12 months happens, we will have no formal, direct relationship with Ontario?
Yeah, that's absolutely right, though. They actually are operating their own airport at this point. They have their own debt structure, their own financing. We carry no more debt on our books for any any Ontario infrastructure. And so at this point, the only relationship we have is as relative airports in a big industry and the employee agreement.
Yeah. And so many people in Southern California, and especially around the west side and Westchester, say, why can't we get more air traffic to Long Beach, Orange County, Burbank, and Ontario? Why can't we force the airlines to be out there instead of having all these, even San Diego? Someone told me that Well, how many flights from San Diego to LA?
Yeah, no flights.
No?
No.
There are no flights from San Diego airport to LAX.
Oh, yes, of
Yeah.
course, sorry. Sorry, I
Yeah.
thought you meant Carlsbad. So it's a market-based economy. And airports just simply do not
Yeah,
have.
but wait a minute,
Yeah.
the market-based economy didn't work when I was talking about having the airport be a market and make a profit and all that.
For the airlines.
Yeah, oh, okay.
Right, for the airlines. So airports do not have any regulatory authority over the air carriers. They operate as private sector businesses. They obviously have a lot of federal rules to follow as well.
But you sign a contract with them in terms of number of gates, and so they can use, and so they have a contract to, like Southwest Airlines here has terminal, a lot, do they have a whole terminal one? Or?
They do.
Okay, and so they can fly as many planes as they can figure out, or they can fly 0.
Well, we wouldn't let them fly 0. We have
No.
certain capacity requirements for an airline to have a gate. But essentially, the answer is yes.
Okay.
So airports cannot restrict competition. We cannot essentially interfere with a competitive environment in the airport, or we would be violating what the grant assurances that I talked with you about earlier. And so to that same regard, we also can't compel an airline to go to a different airport. Airports across the country, including my prior airport, we have tried that as much as possible. Particularly when you have an airport, say for instance like San Francisco, where delays are incessant. And we have looked at legal schemes to try to compel the air carriers to not continue to fly into a congested airport and to go to an airport instead that had wide open runways and wide open gates and opportunities. But that is not within the purview of the FAA to tell an air carrier where to fly, nor is it within the purview of the airport to be able to tell that carrier. Now, we can encourage, and we have done that. We have offered, and when we were operating Ontario, we encouraged. We provided incentive programs, marketing programs, and of course the competing airports in our region continue to do that and offer incentives for carriers to fly into their cities and their airports. But there is a hub mentality. When we look at what's happened in the post-recession era, we find that all of the growth that's happening back in the industry today is occurring at your nation's biggest airports. And while that's great for those of us sitting in these airports, it is also a challenge for the industry, and that's something that I'm sensitive to. I want a healthy industry for aviation, not just a few winners across the system.
When you, let me go back to that video that we saw. And so you're talking about how you're going to procure for the private sector to build that. So in a way, it won't end up looking like that, right? That's a best guess, because you can actually get proposals that have a very different design. But there will be a people mover. You just don't know what the buildings are going to look like, et cetera. Am I correct on that?
So we might have purple. I'm just kidding. Imagine if we just let that be up to the eyes of the masterful architects out there. Can you imagine some of the themes that might come back for our building and our facilities? I imagine they could be pretty outlandish and pretty wild, which I think would be a little bit of fun, but probably not the best use of our time in trying to get this project done. So one of the things that we've done to help control what the facilities might look like and make sure that they're aesthetically pleasing, because that's the gateway to Los Angeles, is to set what we've called a design theme. But at the same time, I'm really interested in how the architects and the designers will create something that's very special beyond what just the engineers that at our LAWA might contemplate. And so we've established that what we're looking for is this mid-century LA modern architecture. So it will complement the existing architecture we have, particularly the theme building, which is a historically sensitive building. So there are a lot of rules around what we can and cannot do to make sure that the new train system does not detract from that building, which I think is actually a very good thing. And so this modern mid-century is very light, it's very open, it's very clean lines. It just so happens to be exactly my taste. But I'm excited because all of the development teams, and we have 4 that are competing for that, are going to put their own rendition on what that new mid-century modern architecture is going to look like for our train system. I expect that lighting and materials will all be very different from each of the proposers, and will be a really exciting way to have a new front door for LAX.
How about the old tower? We can knock that down?
We don't have plans to knock it down
But that's
at
pretty
this
ugly
point.
though,
That's
is it?
also, it's the eye of the beholder, Fernando, because to the Historical Society, that is actually a historical, significant
Okay.
building.
Everything to the Historical Society. It's
There's
historical,
a
by
theme,
definition.
you said it, not I. I have to make friends and keep friends with that group. And these are some of the challenges we have. Inside that old tower, there are these huge columns that make using the majority of that building infeasible. I mean, like literally, it's 12 stories, and the only usable space is at the very bottom, the basement, and then the very top tower, which doesn't create a lot of space because it's not a tower anymore. We have a brand new tower, and it's a seismic hazard.
It would be a very cool office for the CEO to be the whole thing
I
up there.
think you're right.
Yeah,
And
that
so $10 million later with
Oh.
seismic infrastructure, maybe there'd be some questions about that. But these are the challenges that we face, or how do we navigate some of these rules and regs that, to us can sometimes be an inconvenience, but they're there to preserve the past so that our future can be built on something that we still see.
Okay, so going back to where I was talking about the new development, you mentioned 4 development teams. Well, how did you choose those teams, and what will be their role?
So the 4 teams are teams that are actually competing to be selected to build the automated people mover section of the system.
Oh, so these are private sector teams, and did you help put them together?
No, this is the industry forming by itself of P3 infrastructure investors. So you do typically have these global infrastructure funds, developers that are, they're not very plentiful, but they deal with big scale construction across the world and here as well. One of the teams is based here, which is fantastic, AECOM, the world's largest, I think, architecture and engineering firm. And so those teams essentially self-assemble. And sometimes they have worked together on projects elsewhere. In some cases, the team is formed brandly anew. But this is a team that we're looking to select out of 4. That's actually brand new news for those that might not have heard that.
Why, there were more?
There were 5.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh,
there were 5.
you got rid of one.
Well, let me say that when we set out on this process, we were hoping to get 3 good teams, right? Because to compete to do this project, can you guess, before the project is awarded, just putting the package together, bringing the teams out, doing all of your project resource and unloading, they're going to invest over $10 million just to compete in the process.
So to submit the proposal to do the work is going to cost each of these teams $10 million.
$10 million,
Right.
right? So it's a huge investment, and so agencies like ours always have a concern that, is our project big enough, good enough, interesting enough? Have we set it up in a way that the teams feel like this is going to be a successful project? So they're willing to invest $10 million on a 20 or 25% chance that they may win this project. And I've been very pleased with who we got to respond. They are the top firms in this space.
In the world.
In the world. Top firms in this space in the world. And what they show is a reflection of this project being a good project that's great for infrastructure in P3. It will change the landscape for the industry. And they have a high level of confidence in Los Angeles. One of the key elements is I went and did a lot of forensics and lessons learned from other industries that had done P3. And the thing that resonated the most with me that these companies were looking for is political certainty. What they have seen are great projects to build things, but where political environment gave them a lot of uncertainty, and that somewhere in the process the projects were pulled, et cetera. And so before we went down this path, my team and I met with the mayor, met with key elected officials, and these were many, many, many meetings to ensure that there was going to be a level of political support to reflect that this city should engage in a project that was going to ask so much of the proposing teams. And what we got was resounding yes. And that political support has continued in many, many ways through the year that we've been underway with this process. And we launched that process back in February 15. We will finish it exactly 1 year from almost today, next February.
You mean the selection process?
The selection process.
And typically, we call it RFP, request
For proposal.
And this is a typical request for proposal, but very unique in terms of what you're asking.
That's right. And the way we engage with the industry during the design development is also unique
And
for
so
this.
were you at the stage right now of the RFP where you were gonna eliminate somebody, or was that beyond the RFP that you eliminated this fifth, what you call them,
It was
development team?
this team actually decided to consolidate differently. And so we are not eliminating any other of the teams. What we expect are the teams to continue forward into the process, and then we make a selection of our winning proposer at the end of this year.
And is this for the rental, this is for the eight?
That's for the automated people mover
Oh,
system.
that's cool. And so it's really people who built some of these people movers before. And so I guess every team would have to have like a construction firm, a transportation firm, architects. What are some of the other major elements?
So you have rail providers, so most rail systems are specialty providers that provide their own unique systems, both in terms of the operating and also the train cars that serve those systems. And then, of course, to your point, you have the developer that orchestrates the entire system. In this case, the P3 aspect really comes not just from the operator and then the folks that will maintain the system for 30 years, but also the financing of the system over the course of the
So it
development
sounds
too.
very
So there are bankers involved
Yeah,
as
so
well.
it sounds very complicated, and earlier you had talked about inclusion and local hiring. So how do you ensure that these major international companies, how would a small business play in this space, or I can't even conceptualize that.
Yeah, we expect a lot of small business and local business to play in the space. I mean, it begins with your voice. It begins with saying what's important. It's like, saying having a safe project is important. To me, inclusivity, our mayor calls it reflectivity, is just as important as having a safe project. And you would never go about building a contract with a contractor you thought was going to endanger its people. And so the inclusion to me and to our board and to this mayor is also just as important as safety is. So we've messaged that, and we've put some meat into the procurement. As the rules are embedded upon us, we also embed the rules too. And so this is the first project of this type that has ever included points for selection towards how these teams are going to reflect inclusivity. And that's 10% of the score, which means that could be that that 10%, it could be 5, 8, 4 points that they win in their inclusivity plans and also their demonstrated track record that allows them to win this huge opportunity. So it's a big statement to the contracting community that we're serious about that. And when it's expected, I believe that we will see incredible results. I've seen it on other projects, and I know that this is a team of developers that are really interested in winning and securing this job. So I think there'll be really creative, meaningful opportunities and partnerships because of our expectation.
So this is just conjecture on my part then. So there's these 4 development teams, and they're probably made up, like you said, of bankers, et cetera, and these are like large international conglomerates, and they've come together, and they're gonna submit a bid to LAX. And within that, they're gonna talk about how they're gonna use small businesses that are from LA, how they're gonna hire local individuals, right? But they cannot talk about minority or women-owned businesses or employees, or can they?
They can. We have restrictions on unfortunately, on what we call disadvantaged business enterprise, which is a federal program that we actually can't use in the scoring because there's actually no federal funds in this. But what we can score and value is local, small, and diverse businesses. Yeah. And so we've made a way for that to happen. We actually led the way for the city of Los Angeles to pass a new ordinance to allow us, and it's going to be modeled by other city departments actually, to allow the scoring on small, local, and diverse business.
So I got like about 20 other questions, but I'm going to stop right here and ask students to,
I'd love to hear from them.
yeah, and find out if they have questions, comments, suggestions, stories.
I especially love suggestions. I'd love to hear what you all are thinking out there.
Well, while they're thinking of a question, oh, no, there's one. Yes.
I have some questions. If you could just fill in the like gaps in your resume as to like how
Gaps.
you graduated from San Jose State University in Bachelor's of Science, right?
That's right.
And then you immediately went into the Port of Oakland as finance, and then you became interim executive officer. How did you just jump like right out of college to these major positions?
Okay, well, I did miss one thing. So I spent about a year in Silicon Valley. And, you know, in hindsight, I wasn't seeing that all the, you know, new millionaires were going to come from Silicon Valley, and I moved up north. But I would say this. So having a career in the sciences was really helpful for me. You know, having that finance background, so much of what I do ends up being you know, thoughtful, deliberative decision making, and having a financial background helps you, you know, with that. So I think for those like with econ or computer science, I mean, all of that you actually will really use in a role like mine. I just worked really hard, and I took the opportunity to meet the leaders in my organization and was bold about saying, I'm trying to figure out my path. I want to do something meaningful and outreach, and just made a network that was really helpful as opportunities became available. I was right there, and I was able to do that. I think that you know, you should always, you know, conduct yourself in the way that says, I'm looking to move to that next level and take that next opportunity. And especially for the women in here, I have a message, because so often women, we talk about how these opportunities may come in your lap and you might feel like you're not ready for it. And there's an adage that says, well, you know, men know they're not ready for it, but they jump at those opportunities. Well, whether man or woman, you're always going to be doing something for the first time. You're always going to be a department leader for the very first time. You're always going to be a CEO for the very first time. And everyone in those positions had the same experience at some point in their career. If you show up prepared, ready to work hard, I truly believe that everything is possible. I would also say be flexible. I started in finance and then went into operations, and then eventually also ran the seaport. And that was a very different endeavor, but the team needed me. My board needed me at that time to run the seaport. And so staying open and staying flexible in your career allows you to enjoy it. I wasn't a person that had a fixation on any one role, title, or position. I just always wanted to be doing something that was compelling, that was challenging, and that was invigorating. And if you keep developing and maybe not have a lot of pressure on yourself to actually get to one specific place, sometimes that's better because you get to really enjoy a invigorating and unexpected journey.
Yeah, but you didn't just go from college to finance. You wasn't like the head of finance right away, right out of college.
Right.
I mean, she worked in finance and worked your way up, then went over to operations and all that. Would you do anything different? Do you regret anything? Professionally, I'm talking about. We don't need to get into the
We're not going to
personal.
talk about my husband?
Yeah.
I don't regret him. You know, I wouldn't, and that's not because it's been easy. You know, there have been really challenging times. You know, times where you come home and you're like, ooh, why did I do that? Ooh, I wish I had thought about that decision differently. I wish I had handled that situation another way. But I say that those are all part of the journey. And you know, when you are in the depths of it, having to make really difficult decisions, those decisions really prepare you. So every tough time that I've had truly has prepared me for something else along the way. And so I look back on that as it was really strengthening, and it's helpful. They're going to happen. I wouldn't change anything.
What's your favorite airport other than LAX and Oakland? You can't choose those two.
I do love Heathrow, which I know a lot of people don't understand because Heathrow has so many problems and issues. But I feel like the experience at Heathrow is one that passengers really enjoy. They have an incredible retail experience. It's something that we don't have here, which is really street price shopping. So you're in Heathrow and it actually feels like you're on High Street. And it really, I think, caters to a lot of the passengers. The top airports in the world today are in the Middle East. They're Dubai or Qatar or Shanghai or Singapore. Singapore is a beautiful, beautiful airport. It's also a beautiful city. So it's like the city and the airport really complement each other. And I appreciate that a lot. While we're just figuring out how to get traffic moving through our terminal area, they're building like a butterfly garden. It's phenomenal. They have an indoor swimming pool. So that's why I said I'm excited. We have a long way to go. We can make a difference.
That whole area by the beach for the El Segundo Blue. You got a whole butterfly area for LAX.
That's right. The passengers just can't see it. And this is what's fun. So Michael Govan, the CEO of LACMA, the Museum of Modern Art, he came out to the airport the other day because he's this big visionary thinker that I really enjoy. And we were looking at that where, and his idea was how do we do some land art that, maybe is limited in terms of people that I could actually travel through because we do preserve the blue butterfly in that area, but maybe there can be something really special that you see on approach or on departure from the sky from that area that is, truly iconic LA. A couple weeks ago, we launched a partnership with the Grammys, and this is the first time. And so Chance the Rapper was out, and we have his display on the column wraps around the airport, something we had never done. So it's exciting to be in LA and to have the entertainment industry and to have the arts industry, which is just so booming and fascinating, and be able to incorporate them and make LA fresh, LAX fresh as LA is.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Brenda, and you briefly mentioned this at the beginning, but what was your perspective or role on the LAX protest that happened a couple of weeks ago?
So my role was sitting at the airport watching throws and throws and throws, waves of people coming in. And so that was a really incredible day. We had some reports the day before. I think we had a protest of about 200 people. And at that time, frankly, I was trying to figure out what the executive order was and what it wasn't. We have a close relationship with the Customs and Border Protection team that's deployed out at LAX, and they follow national direction from headquarters back in Washington. And we were hearing different things about how they were interpreting the executive order, whether the order included legal permanent residents or whether it didn't, which countries. This thing happened so fast that we were all just figuring out, okay, are they implementing it now? Is it going to happen? How are they going to do it? What's going to actually transpire? And by the next day, so that was Friday when we first got the order, it was pretty quiet. The next day we had a couple hundred protesters. We were getting information from CBP about what we should expect.
What's CBP?
The Customs and Border Protection. So that's the federal agency that is entrusted with securing the border, securing the border, and for admitting or not admitting people into the United States. So that's their sole jurisdiction. They have a facility called a federal inspection facility that's at the airport on our property where that happens. By the next day, Sunday, we knew we were going to have a large protest. I have a chief of police and about 1,300 law enforcement officers that report to him, and he reports to me.
And these are officers that are LAX officers,
Those are,
not LAPD,
that's right.
not federal, et cetera. They report to this
to
chief
me.
that reports to you.
Right, those are our officers.
This is your officers.
Right. And so I'm never going to take a bet from or have my chief of police give me any guidance on putting down a bet, because he was like, oh, Deborah, I think we're probably going to have about 1,500 protesters. They're saying 2,500, but I think this is going to be about 1,500. So the next morning I went to the airport, and the mayor had a press conference, so we briefed him, and I facilitated a meeting with him and our customs director. And at that point, that was probably around 11 a.m., at that point we probably had 1,000 protesters, and the protest wasn't going to start until 2. By 5 o'clock, we were at several thousand protesters. What I did was work with the customs folks to just get more information to the families, to the attorneys, to our elected officials, so they understood what was happening. And the largest, most important responsibility for me was keeping the airport safe and secure. So keeping the several thousand people that were now coming into the roadways, walking in the streets, walking around the airport, ensuring that they were going to be safe, and that my police officers were able to keep those folks safe, and at the same time not become the story. Not become a story where the protesters weren't treated respectfully, even though it's against the grain of the people that work at the airport to see the airport shut down, to see passengers that are trying to make their flights and to be connected to go back home or to business, to be stuck and not be able to go through the airport. Our purpose is to provide a great airport, an open and a safe airport. So my biggest concern was just that the crowd and that large volume of people for a prolonged period at the airport, and the concern that I had for keeping everyone safe. My team did an incredible job. The level of coordination that it takes to make that happen is something that I can't impress how significant it was. We have a lot of tools and technology available at the airport to help us have good eyes and ears and visibility to what's happening. We call it situational awareness. And because of that, because of the way the team, they valued and understood what was happening, we were able to, deal with what was significant disruption, but in a way that kept everyone, safe.
At the height, how many were there? 7,000?
We estimate 7,000 individuals.
Yeah. And I heard that there was actually times where the protesters were cooperating with your officers to, protest in the streets, then get off and on.
There, unfortunately, with these protests, so many people were peaceful and their hearts were sympathetic to what was happening, as was my team and so many of our airline partners. Just highly sympathetic to what was happening. But at the same time, we also had folks that were radical, and they were not peaceful, and they were prone and wanted to incite violence. And so the concern in any situation like that is that can become very combustible. And my concern is about crowd control and the innocent people there, not being kept safe. And so at a certain point, we had to move to really disband those that were left that were creating more of a problem and an issue for safety.
Yeah. We have time for a couple more questions. Yeah.
So the recent weather conditions in Los Angeles have kind of shown us how important infrastructure is in terms of maintaining safety and efficiency, especially in a space like the airport. So with the recent projects going on, how much of a factor has redoing infrastructure been in making sure that it's better able to deal with these extreme weather conditions and possible natural disasters?
Great question. We continue to raise the bar in regards to how we invest in infrastructure. So before, you would build a train system or a roadway and not plan for a 100-year flood, right? A 100-year storm. These are all now very real issues for us. And so not only are we looking to build a beautiful building or terminal, but we're looking at what we call resiliency. And so resiliency is about wind conditions changing to extreme environments, rain, cold conditions changing to what would have been thought of as extreme and unforeseen conditions. As we've watched climate change erode the sea level, and we've seen sea level rise across the state and flooding happen in the magnitude of whether it's 50-year or 100-year storms, we look at the experiences across the country, And I believe strongly that when we're making these billion-dollar investments, we're not going to just value engineer our way out of those projects. We need to make sure we build with a mind to climate change, climate adaptation, and making our infrastructure more resilient.
Okay, well, this last question for the semester for you.
Okay, good.
So you're straight A?
Given the current situation with the Manchester Square and your expansion of LAX, do you think that this problem was a misappropriation from your predecessors to address firsthand, or do you, because you kind of inherited this situation that's going on, how do you plan to combat that with, given like the help from the city and everything, with new measures being passed?
Can I tell
Okay.
you all the other inherited
Yeah.
situations I've got?
But can you contextualize for the rest
Yeah.
of the students about Manchester Square and the homelessness issue? They may not know about that.
Right, so one of the area where we're actually going to develop the consolidated rental car facility is an area that we have been trying to buy for probably 15 years, parcel by parcel, because first and foremost, it's in what we call a non-compatible use zone. And as the airport grew historically, flight patterns changed, and as we built the runways, there were actually homes that were in this non-compatible zone deemed by the FAA. So these homes and schools have planes that are very, very loud, that are traveling in that region. And so in every area, the FAA has deemed certain land around an airport to be not compatible for housing or for schools, et cetera, for tall buildings, for instance. And so Manchester Square is actually one of those locations. And so over the course of time, we've been trying to buy different properties in order to use it, in order to, number one, become compliant so we don't have homeowners and renters that are actually exposed to these noise conditions. And then number two, we've developed this plan to develop the rental-car facility there. As we have had pockets and parcels bought up, but still some homes, which are mostly apartment buildings with a lot of renters in them. Streets in some form have been vacated, but many streets still exist because people live there. We have found that the homelessness population, those that are suffering from those conditions, have started to populate in that area that we call Manchester Square, not unlike the areas that you see all across the city. But of course, we have plans for that area. So our charge is to work very closely with the city, to work closely with nonprofit agencies, with communities, to find a path for the people that are suffering the homelessness conditions. And within the federal law, which is a really big challenge for me in this situation, because I can't just go and build housing. Again, this goes back to what we talked about, some of the fundamentals of the restrictions that we have on us as airports. We have to find creative ways with our partners to help move the people suffering homelessness to a better place. And that's a big challenge. We have a task force. Our law enforcement officers work on this very much with knowing the population that's there, helping the caseworkers and case managers to find pathways for the individuals. And my team, Trevor Daly, who's my Chief of External Affairs, has great experience from doing similar work at the VA. We're looking for all those tools and methods and practices. I know someone here said they were social work. I mean, we are, I would love to hear your ideas and thoughts on how we continue to have better and more impact to create a better pathway for the people that we find in our neighborhood that are so challenged.
Well, I want to thank Deborah Flint for coming
Voice is
out here.
gone.
I still have like 100 questions about cargo and security, cybersecurity, the Inglewood Stadium, whether, the FAA ruling on that, dealing with commissioners, and I can go on and on, but I will stop here and let's give her a
you
nice
guys are great.
Okay. And so we didn't even I had some questions about internships and all kinds of different things. So.
Please apply for internships. I would love to see you. Hopefully you heard a little bit in my message was think about the opportunities in aviation. It might not have been apparent to you, but whether it's in the environmental area, the business, sciences, justice, law enforcement, there is a career path for every single one of you. And I will tell you that the industry is really short on your generation coming into our business and into our industry. So whether it's myself, the easy email, dflint@lawa.org, Trevor, Ross, stay in touch and stay connected, because we would love to see you have a pathway to the great work that we do.
Okay. And for my class, yes, there is a midterm next week, and yes, this will be on the midterm. And then stay over a little bit longer. We're going to talk a little bit about the precinct quality study that we're going to do. Okay? All right. Thanks, guys.
Right. Tough teacher. Midterm next week.
Yeah, it is midterm time, so.
Is that right?
Yeah.
What month is it? February? When is the semester at?
It ends up the last week of April. So
Oh,
the first
okay.
week
Is
of
it-
May is
uh-huh.
final.
Okay, oh, wow. And is that when school's out?
Yeah.
Oh,
And we'll
wow,
have
okay.
like Mother's Day will be graduation.
Oh, well, maybe I'll have one
Yeah.
coming in.
Oh yeah, we're looking forward to that. That would be great.
You're a good question. Yeah. I was like, is he a reporter?
You want me to feel like you have to make a presentation?
Oh, I know.
Request stuff that you know and.
You're very good.
Like when was it